My boss fired me a week before retirement to avoid paying my pension and called me a leech on the company. I shook his hand, smiled, and left quietly. By the time he realized what I had already planned against him, it was too late. My name is Walter Grayson, and I am 73 years old. I live in Summerlin, a coastal city where I worked for over 4 decades as a senior systems analyst. I dedicated my entire adult life to Vornex International, mentoring young executives and building internal software systems. The company expanded across 4 continents with my help and guidance. I wasn't just an employee at that place. I was a foundation stone. I had planned to retire peacefully, finally take my pension, and maybe travel to see my brother in Aldwych. Instead, everything fell apart in the worst possible way. 1 week before my retirement, I was abruptly fired by the new CEO, Carter Maddox. Carter Maddox handed me a termination letter and told me that old men like me were just leeches. He offered no handshake, no appreciation, not even goodbye party after my decades of service. After 41 years of loyalty, I was tossed out like expired equipment from a storage room. The worst part was that by firing me before my official retirement date, they legally avoided paying my pension. Carter Maddox didn't just fire me. He robbed me of my future security and dignity. That same day, security escorted me out of the building like I was some kind of criminal. My office was packed into a brown cardboard box by strangers who didn't know my name. I wasn't even allowed to say goodbye to the people I had trained for years. They claimed it was for company integrity, but I knew the real reason behind it. Carter Maddox wanted me erased from the company's history quickly and quietly without any fuss. Carter Maddox knew that firing me just 1 week before retirement would raise serious red flags. It could even spark a lawsuit that would cost the company millions in legal fees. So he orchestrated a careful cover-up, one designed to look clean on paper but dirty in intent. A week before the termination, Carter Maddox quietly circulated an internal memo accusing me of non-compliance with cybersecurity protocols. He cited a supposed breach in the company's proprietary systems that never actually happened. The accusation claimed that I had ignored a new company-wide directive about multi-factor authentication updates. This supposedly allowed sensitive financial data to be left vulnerable for over 48 hours. Carter Maddox claimed this lapse endangered a major acquisition deal and breached internal security policies. To solidify his lie, Carter Maddox worked with a desperate junior compliance officer to backdate fake documentation. The papers showed that I was notified of the update and failed to act responsibly. He also inserted false entries in the IT activity logs to make it appear convincing. The logs showed that I had overridden certain alerts and dismissed warnings from the security system. It was just enough technical jargon to confuse the HR department and legal team completely. But it wasn't enough for criminal charges, just enough to justify termination without pension benefits. That way, if I decided to sue, Carter Maddox could claim he didn't fire me for age. He could say he fired me for negligence and security violations instead. Carter Maddox thought he had perfectly discarded and cheated me out of my retirement benefits. He believed he had covered all his tracks and protected himself from any legal consequences. But what Carter Maddox didn't know was that my revenge was going to be absolutely devastating. Keep watching, because my revenge for this unjust crime wasn't loud or obvious at first, but it was masterful, strategic, and it would destroy everything he had worked for. What made this betrayal devastating wasn't just about money or benefits. It was about 41 years of dedication and trust. But Carter Maddox had made one critical mistake in his calculations. He saw me as a weak old man who would quietly disappear into retirement. He had no idea that I still had connections, knowledge, and most importantly, the determination to fight back. The chapter that came next would change both our lives forever. After Carter Maddox fired me, I sat in my car in the company parking lot for nearly an hour. I held that termination letter in my hand, like it was a death certificate from a hospital. 41 years of my life were gone in a few cold sentences written by lawyers. My chest felt heavy, not with anger at first, but with complete and total disbelief. I had given Vornex International everything I had to offer as a dedicated employee. Every holiday I skipped, every overtime shift, every crisis I stayed late to fix. I did it all for that company and its success. For them to send me out the back door without a handshake, or thank you cut deeper than expected. I thought about the nights I missed putting my daughter to bed just to meet impossible deadlines. I remember the time I flew across the country on Christmas Eve to fix a software crash. The crash could have waited until after the holidays, but I went anyway because I cared. I once helped Carter Maddox clean up a public relations mess that could have cost him his entire career. Now that same man was the one who stripped me of my dignity, pension, and legacy. I went home that night and sat alone in my den, staring at framed employee awards. The plaques suddenly felt like mockery hanging on my wall after what had just happened. The betrayal wasn't just corporate policy. It was deeply personal and calculated to hurt me. The more I examined the so-called evidence against me, the more obvious the setup became. This wasn't simple incompetence or misunderstanding. It was a carefully planned frame job, framing me for a fabricated cybersecurity breach, falsifying IT logs, and planning backdated memos about protocol violations. It was all staged like a theater performance. Why would it go to such elaborate lengths to destroy my reputation? To fire me 1 week before retirement and keep my pension in the company's bank account? I later learned that Carter Maddox had even rehearsed the justification with HR and legal departments in advance. He built a paper trail to make it look like I was the risk, the liability. With that false narrative firmly in place, he pulled the trigger on my termination for cause. No benefits, no severance, just a slap in the face after 4 decades of faithful service. At first, I tried the legal route like any reasonable person would do in my situation. I consulted with an employment lawyer and laid out all the facts of my case. But he warned me that Carter Maddox had covered his tracks too well with false documentation. It would be a long, expensive battle with no guarantee of justice or financial recovery. I felt defeated, trapped, and completely humiliated by the entire situation that had been forced upon me. But then I looked at my grandson's crayon drawing sitting on my desk at home. The drawing showed a stick figure with the words, "To Grandpa, my hero," written in blue crayon. That was the exact moment I decided to take a different path forward with the situation. He had picked the wrong man to mess with in such a calculated way. Now I was going to make him regret every single decision he had made against me. I began to plan my revenge quietly, strategically, and with unstoppable determination building inside me. There would be 2 phases to my plan, and these phases were aimed toward destroying Carter Maddox's career. The consequences would match exactly what he had done to me and my family's future. I didn't want an apology or a settlement check. I wanted Carter Maddox to feel the same pain. I wanted him to lose everything he had worked for, just like he had done to me. My first step toward revenge wasn't loud or obvious. It began with a single phone call to someone I knew would listen carefully. I reached out to a man named Tarmon Keel, who was the chief strategy officer at Orvexis Corporation. Orvexis was a longtime rival of Vornix International, and there was serious bad blood between the companies. A year ago, during a heated technology conference, Carter Maddox had publicly humiliated Orvexis in front of investors. He mocked their business model and called their leadership second-rate thinkers in a first-rate market completely. It had cost Orvexis valuable investors, credibility, and market momentum that took months to recover from. Tarmon Keel never forgot that humiliation, and I was counting on his desire for payback. When I called him, I didn't need to explain much about my situation or motivations. I simply told him that I believed I could help him win his next acquisition, war against Vornix International. Tarmon was immediately interested and asked to meet in person to discuss the details further. We arranged a discreet meeting at a private golf lodge outside the city limits. No phones were allowed, no recordings, just 2 men talking business over expensive whiskey. I told Tarmon that I knew about an AI diagnostic startup called Medivance Analytics that interested both companies. Carter Maddox was planning to acquire this company in a deal worth millions of dollars. It was a move that would catapult Carter Maddox into the global spotlight and solidify his reputation. The acquisition would also put him on the Forbes innovation list as a rising star. I explained to Tarmon that I knew the inner workings of this acquisition deal completely. Thanks to two former ments who were still loyal to me inside Vornex International, I had access. Avi Morin was a junior financial analyst who quietly slipped me internal timelines and budget information. Heston Dree was a cybersecurity consultant who helped mask my digital trail from company monitoring systems. Both of these young professionals owed me their careers and their current positions at the company. I had helped them survive downsizing attempts years ago under the previous CEO's leadership before Carter Maddox took over. When the company was cutting costs and eliminating positions, I had personally recommended them for promotions. I had written glowing performance reviews and vouched for their value to upper management repeatedly. They remembered my kindness and were willing to help me in my time of need. With Avi's financial documents and Heston's backdoor access to company systems, I could give Orvexis everything they needed. Vornex's bid strategy, negotiation windows, even Carter Maddox's personal talking points for the acquisition meetings. Then I suggested to Tarmon exactly how Orvexis could sweep in at the right moment. They could offer Medivance Analytics a better deal before Carter Maddox could finalize his acquisition. Tarmon Keel was skeptical at first, which was understandable given the risks involved for both companies. He asked me directly why I was doing this and what I hoped to gain. I told him the complete story of how Carter Maddox had fired me unjustly 1 week before my official retirement. I explained the fabricated cybersecurity breach, the falsified documents, and the stolen pension benefits that should have been mine. Tarmon listened carefully and sympathized with my situation, even offered me a position at Orvexis Corporation. I told him honestly that I wasn't doing this because I wanted a new job opportunity. I was doing this because I wanted to get back at Carter Maddox for destroying my life. Tarmon understood revenge better than most business executives, and he agreed to help me completely. So I gave him all the required information about the Medivance Analytics acquisition deal that Carter Maddox was pursuing. The documents included financial projections, timeline schedules, and even personal notes from Carter Maddox's private meetings. With this insider information, Orvexis could position themselves perfectly to steal the deal from under Carter Maddox's nose. They would know exactly when to make their move and how much to offer. Before I launched the second phase of my plan, I sat alone in my study. A part of me hesitated about what I was doing to the company. Was I crossing a line that I could never uncross again in my life? Carter Maddox had wronged me terribly, but sabotaging the entire company meant hurting innocent employees too. It wasn't any different from what Carter Maddox had done to me in the first place. Doing the right thing wouldn't restore what Carter Maddox had stolen from me and my family. I didn't want an apology or a settlement check on the company. I wanted consequences, even if it meant becoming the very thing I had once stood against in my career. That's when the second phase of my plan began to take shape in my mind. My second move was subtle but devastating in its precision and timing for maximum impact. A week after I had set the Orvexis acquisition sabotage in motion, I reached out to another contact. Her name was Mirla Crane, an investigative journalist at the Ledger Post, a publication known for exposing corporate corruption. Years ago, I had helped Mirla's father win a workplace compensation case when he was wrongfully terminated. She remembered that favor and knew she owed me for my assistance back then. I fed her a carefully curated dossier filled with evidence of unethical labor practices at Vornex International. The documents included pension fund mismanagement and a string of internal memos that hinted at systematic age discrimination. But the masterstroke of my plan was disguising the leak so that it pointed directly back to Carter Maddox. With help from my former cybersecurity protege, Heston Dree, I routed the leak through a VPN system. The digital trail was tied to Carter Maddox's own IP history, pinging from devices he frequently used at work. I even timed the email drops during hours when Carter Maddox was known to work late. The digital fingerprints were elegant and completely incriminating for anyone who investigated the source. When the Ledger Post ran the expose, the fallout was immediate and devastating for the company. Whispers began swirling around Vornex International's boardroom about who could have leaked such damaging information to the press. Carter Maddox's name wasn't mentioned in the article directly, but the leaked trail pointed straight to him. The board members began to suspect their own CEO. Internal investigations kicked off quietly, with expensive lawyers and forensic accountants examining every digital footprint. Behind closed doors, board members began questioning Carter Maddox's loyalty to the company and its shareholders. I didn't make a single public move during this entire process, and no one tied the story back to me. To everyone else in the company, it looked like Carter Maddox had turned against his own organization. Meanwhile, I also arranged for whispers to reach several important investment circles in the city. I leaked false concerns about Carter Maddox's aggressive financial tactics and questionable business decisions to key investors. As rumors spread and confidence dipped, Vornex International stock began to wobble slowly but steadily. The decline was quiet and strategic, designed to look like natural market forces rather than sabotage. The stage was now perfectly set for Carter Maddox's complete downfall, and he had no idea what was coming. I was just getting started with my comprehensive plan for revenge against the man who destroyed my life. The downfall came faster and more brutal than I had ever imagined it would be. When the Medivance Analytics acquisition slipped through Vornex International's fingers and landed cleanly in Orvexis Corporation's hands, the board was stunned. Millions of dollars in projected profit vanished overnight, and investors began panicking about the company's future. Shareholders demanded immediate answers from leadership about how such a crucial deal could have gone wrong. In a closed-door emergency session, Carter Maddox was confronted by the board of directors about his alleged disloyalty. He stuttered, denied everything, and panicked as the evidence mounted against him from multiple sources. But the evidence I had so carefully planted and orchestrated made him look like the saboteur. The board accused him of gross disloyalty, breach of fiduciary duty, and leaking confidential company data. Within just a few days, Carter Maddox was stripped of his position and fired without benefits. No severance package, no pension, absolutely nothing after years of service to the company. The same man who had robbed me of my future had now lost his own. But the twist in this story didn't stop there, because the board had more surprises coming. In an attempt to salvage Vornex International's reputation and calm the public storm, the board extended a formal apology. They invited me back to the company, not just to pay my overdue retirement and pension benefits. They wanted me to return as a senior board consultant to help restore what they claimed they had nearly lost. The board and the new CEO hired me back with a salary that was double my previous income. I accepted their offer without hesitation, returning not as a regular employee, but as their equal. I had achieved everything I had set out to accomplish through my careful planning and execution. Carter Maddox was completely destroyed, and I was vindicated in the eyes of everyone who mattered. But as I sat in my new office, something felt wrong about the entire situation. The victory didn't taste as sweet as I had expected it would after months of planning. 3 months after my triumphant return to Vornex International, I discovered something that changed everything I thought I knew. While cleaning out Carter Maddox's former office, I found a hidden folder in his desk drawer. Inside were medical records, financial documents, and a letter addressed to his young daughter, Emma. The letter was dated just 2 weeks before he fired me from the company that terrible day. The medical records revealed that Carter Maddox's 8-year-old daughter had been diagnosed with a rare genetic condition. The treatment required experimental therapy that cost over $2 million, and insurance wouldn't cover procedures. The financial documents showed that Carter Maddox had already mortgaged his house, sold his investments, and borrowed money. He was still hundreds of thousands of dollars short of the amount needed for his daughter's treatment. The letter to Emma was written in his handwriting, explaining why Daddy had to make some difficult choices. He wrote that he was going to do something terrible to save her life. He knew it was wrong, but losing her would destroy him completely as a father. Carter Maddox had calculated that my pension fund, combined with several other early retirements, would provide enough money. The money would cover Emma's medical expenses and give her a chance at a normal life. I sat in that office reading those documents over and over again, feeling sick to my stomach. The man I had destroyed wasn't just a greedy corporate executive stealing from employees for profit. He was a desperate father trying to save his dying child's life through any means necessary. Carter Maddox had chosen to sacrifice my retirement to save his daughter from a terrible genetic disease. My hand shook as I read Emma's medical reports and saw the photos Carter Maddox kept. She was a beautiful little girl with blonde hair and bright blue eyes, just like my granddaughter. The treatment she needed was available, but only at a specialized clinic in Switzerland that demanded payment. Without the money, Emma would die within 6 months, according to the medical experts who examined her. I realized that my perfectly executed revenge had destroyed the only person who could have saved her. Carter Maddox lost his job, his reputation, and his ability to pay for Emma's treatment. By the time I discovered the truth, it was too late to change what had happened. The acquisition deals were completed, the board positions were filled, and Carter Maddox was unemployable in the industry. I tried to find Carter Maddox to offer him money for my restored pension and salary, but he had disappeared completely from the city with his daughter after losing everything. I hired private investigators to track him down, but they found nothing except unpaid medical bills. The trail went cold after they left the state, probably heading to family members somewhere far away. The weight of what I had done began crushing me from the inside out every single day. I had spent months planning the perfect revenge against a man who was trying to save his child. While I was focused on my own pain and betrayal, I had destroyed a little girl's chance at life. My quest for justice had turned me into something far worse than Carter Maddox ever was. I couldn't sleep at night, thinking about Emma and wondering if she was still alive somewhere. Every time I looked at my grandson's drawing on my desk, I thought about Carter Maddox's daughter. Have I become the monster in someone else's story? And was there any way to undo the damage? The company welcomed me back, but I felt like a villain every morning. 6 months later, I received a call from a hospital in Denver, Colorado, asking about Carter Maddox's employment. Emma had been admitted to their pediatric unit in critical condition, and they needed insurance verification. I immediately offered to pay for all her medical expenses, but the hospital staff told me something devastating. Carter Maddox had died in a car accident 3 weeks earlier while driving to find work in another state. Emma was alone in the hospital system with no family members who could care for her. She was also too sick for the experimental treatment that might have saved her life months earlier. The window for successful treatment had closed while Carter Maddox and I were fighting our corporate war. My revenge had cost 2 lives instead of just destroying one career like I had planned. I visit Emma's grave every month now, bringing flowers and sitting quietly beside the small headstone. The inscription reads, "Beloved daughter, taken too soon." I never told anyone at the company about what I discovered. They still think I'm the victim who got justice against a corrupt executive who deserved his fate. To this day, I don't know if I made the right choice in pursuing my revenge so ruthlessly. And that's when I understood the terrible truth about my actions. Now that you have heard my story, don't you think I've been a monster all along? This story teaches us that sometimes the people who wrong us are fighting battles we know nothing about. Before you seek revenge, ask yourself if you truly understand the whole situation. Here are the key lessons from Walter's tragic mistake. 1. Always try to understand the full picture before taking action against someone. Carter Maddox's betrayal was wrong, but he was desperate to save his dying daughter. Walter's revenge destroyed both their lives unnecessarily. 2. Legal channels exist for a reason, even when they seem slow or expensive. Walter should pursue his case through employment lawyers instead of taking matters into his own hands. 3. Revenge often hurts innocent people who had nothing to do with the original wrong. Emma paid the ultimate price for her father's mistake and Walter's retaliation. 4. When someone treats you badly, consider that they might be facing their own crisis. This doesn't excuse their behavior, but it might help you choose a more compassionate response. Comment what resonated most with you from Walter's story. Like and subscribe if you want more content like this that helps you avoid the mistakes others have made. Until next time, keep living with grace and purpose.